The day she arrived at the military base, the air was thick with dust and tension. The ground beneath her boots was hard and dry, every step echoing through the rows of barracks. She was young, perhaps younger than most of the soldiers around her, and she carried only a small backpack and her medical kit. Her uniform fit a little loosely, and she could feel the curious eyes on her as she walked past groups of grizzled men and women who had clearly been through years of training. She could sense their judgment before a word was even spoken, whispers, smirks, and the occasional outright laugh at the idea that she was here to make a difference. "Just a medic," some muttered, shaking their heads. They assumed she would be relegated to cleaning wounds and handing out bandages far from the danger. From the moment she stepped through the gates, she understood the challenge she faced. This was not going to be easy. Every corner of the base told a story of toughness. Mud-stained boots lined up meticulously, weapons polished to a shine, and the distant sound of drills echoing across the training ground. She had trained herself to be strong, but she knew strength alone would not earn respect here. She had to prove herself quietly, without giving them any reason to dismiss her. Her first few days were a mixture of observation and small, careful actions. She watched soldiers run obstacle courses, their faces sweaty but determined, their movements precise and powerful. She took note of everything, the way they carried their weapons, the signals they used to communicate silently, even the way they crouched behind cover. Every detail mattered, and she was determined to learn it all. Even though they saw her as a fragile medic, she had the mind of someone who could anticipate danger, someone who could act fast when the situation demanded it. Not everyone treated her with open hostility, but there was a noticeable skepticism in the air. When she tried to join a routine exercise, a soldier would often step in, saying, "This is no place for someone who's just patching up others." She learned quickly not to argue, because anger or frustration would only confirm their assumptions. Instead, she focused on what she could control: her own skills, her own speed, and her own courage. Every time she fixed a minor injury in the training yard or helped carry supplies efficiently, she silently proved her worth. The living quarters were no different. She shared a small bunk with other medics, who were mostly quiet and slightly wary of her. She wasn't the loud, confident type who demanded attention. Instead, she earned their respect by being thorough, precise, and ready for anything. When a fellow medic hesitated with a task, she stepped in calmly, showing how it could be done correctly. Slowly, the whispers of "she won't last here" began to mix with cautious nods of recognition. Even the environment seemed to challenge her. The nights were cold, with gusts of wind that cut through the thin walls of the barracks. The mornings were harsh, with drills beginning before the sun had fully risen. She felt exhaustion creep in, but she welcomed it. Every sore muscle, every blistered hand, every sleepless night was a step toward proving that she belonged, even if no one yet believed it. Her interactions with the soldiers were especially telling. Many tried to dismiss her with jokes or small tasks meant to humiliate. "Go fetch the coffee?" Or "Are you sure you can carry that kit?" they would ask, smirking. Each time, she responded not with anger, but with action. She carried the heaviest packs, completed the tasks faster than expected, and kept her composure in the face of ridicule. Slowly, though quietly, she began to stand out, not for boasting, but for capability. By the end of her first week, the soldiers were starting to notice that she was different. There was a quiet intensity in her eyes that spoke of determination. She moved through the base with purpose, never showing fear, never asking for approval, but always ready to help where she could. Even the commander, who had not yet formally met her, would later comment on the way she observed everything around her. Always attentive, always learning, never distracted. She was underestimated, yes, but she was learning. Every glance of doubt from the other soldiers fueled her resolve. Every whispered joke about her being just a medic became a reminder that her actions would have to speak louder than words. And in the quiet moments, alone in the barracks at night, she imagined the day when those same soldiers would look at her with respect, maybe even awe. She didn't just want to survive the base. She wanted to show that a medic could be more than a healer. She could be a force to be reckoned with, someone who could step into danger with courage and intelligence. By the end of her first week, she wasn't just surviving. She was quietly planting the seeds of something bigger. Every observation, every small act of competence, and every refusal to let ridicule break her spirit was a step toward proving that she was not just a medic. The base didn't know it yet, but they were about to witness a transformation that no one could ignore. The first few weeks at the base had been a mixture of observation, learning, and quiet determination, but now the real challenges began. The young medic quickly realized that being just a medic was not just about physical tasks. It was also about breaking through the invisible wall of doubt and underestimation that surrounded her. Every soldier around her seemed to carry a silent rulebook about who could and could not contribute in combat, and she was determined to prove that she belonged in every part of it. The early challenges came in small but sharp doses. She was often assigned menial duties, tasks that others dismissed as unimportant. Cleaning the equipment, organizing medical supplies, or running errands across the base were routine for her. On the surface, these jobs seemed trivial, but she treated each one as an opportunity to observe, learn, and refine her skills. She noticed the layout of the barracks, the hidden weak points in the training area, the way soldiers reacted under pressure. Every detail mattered. Even the simplest tasks became lessons in awareness and preparation, a foundation she knew would pay off when real danger arrived. At the same time, the mockery she faced was constant. Some soldiers whispered jokes behind her back, laughing at the idea that she could ever survive on the battlefield. Why bother training her for combat? She's just a medic, they said. Others were more direct, assigning her to tasks meant to humiliate, like carrying supplies far heavier than her body could comfortably manage. Each time she was mocked, she felt a flicker of anger, but learned to convert it into determination rather than letting it break her spirit. She refused to argue or fight. She knew proving herself with results would speak louder than words ever could. Despite the skepticism, she found allies in unexpected places. A few fellow medics recognized her dedication and quietly offered guidance. They shared tips about handling emergencies under pressure, treating injuries in chaotic conditions, and staying calm during intense situations. But even these allies were cautious. They warned her that proving herself to the combat units would be nearly impossible. The culture of the base was rigid, and outsiders, especially women in non-combat roles, were often underestimated. Yet, she did not see this as discouragement. She saw it as a challenge she was determined to overcome. Her training routine became almost obsessive. When others rested, she ran drills alone, practicing moving quickly with a full medical kit, simulating battlefield conditions in her mind. She studied the mechanics of the soldiers' movements, the sounds of approaching danger, and how to react swiftly without hesitation. She practiced emergency medical procedures repeatedly until they became instinct. She even imagined herself in the middle of an ambush, thinking through every decision she would need to make, mentally preparing for situations that others had yet to encounter. The isolation she felt fueled her growth. While other soldiers bonded over shared experiences, she spent long nights refining her skills. When the lights of the barracks dimmed and the base was quiet, she would review notes, check her equipment, and mentally replay scenarios of emergency situations. The quiet hours were her secret advantage. While the soldiers who mocked her slept or relaxed, she transformed every doubt cast her way into motivation, every sarcastic remark into a reason to become stronger, faster, and smarter. The commander, a figure known for strictness and battlefield experience, still viewed her as insignificant. He often ignored her presence during drills, assigning her to rear duties rather than frontline preparation. But the young medic did not let his skepticism stop her. She observed him closely, noting how he communicated with soldiers, how he responded to stress, and even the smallest gestures that hinted at his strategic thinking. These observations were small seeds she would later use when she needed to anticipate his actions and keep him safe. Her challenges weren't only physical, they were emotional as well. The loneliness, the constant doubt from others, and the pressure to perform created moments of frustration. There were times when she questioned herself, wondering if she could ever truly earn respect in a world that seemed designed to underestimate her. But every time doubt crept in, she reminded herself of why she had come here. She wasn't just here to treat injuries. She was here to prove that courage, skill, and intelligence could outweigh prejudice and expectation. Then came the moments of small victories. When a soldier injured himself during a routine drill, she acted swiftly, tending to his wounds with calm precision. She didn't rush to boast or seek attention. She simply did what was needed. Slowly, whispers of recognition began to circulate among the soldiers. They noticed her speed, her knowledge, and her ability to remain calm under pressure. Each small success was a step toward breaking down the barrier that labeled her as just a medic. By the end of this period, she had transformed from a newcomer into someone who was quietly earning respect, even if not everyone acknowledged it openly. She had faced ridicule, isolation, and the constant pressure of underestimation. Yet she had grown stronger, sharper, and more confident. She was no longer just observing. She was preparing not just to survive, but to step into situations that no one would expect her to handle. And deep down, she knew the real test was coming. The moment when her training, patience, and courage would collide with true danger, and when she would finally prove that being a medic did not mean being powerless. By turning every challenge into a lesson, every mockery into motivation, she had started a transformation. Those who doubted her now unknowingly contributed to her growth. What they saw as weakness was, in reality, the forging of a strength that would soon change everything. The stage was set, and the young medic was ready to show that courage and skill were not defined by role or title. They were defined by action. By now, the young medic had spent several weeks at the base, quietly proving herself in small ways, observing the routines, and preparing for the moments when she would finally be needed. But even with her growing skills and confidence, the biggest challenge had not yet arrived. That challenge came in the form of the new commander, a man with a reputation for being strict, strategic, and unforgiving in matters of battlefield discipline. The moment he arrived, it was clear that he ruled with authority. His eyes were sharp, scanning the base and its personnel with a combination of calculation and expectation. He was the kind of leader who demanded respect immediately, but respect in his world was earned through battlefield performance, not polite manners or quiet competence. When he first saw her, the young medic felt the weight of his judgment before he spoke a word. He looked her up and down, barely concealing a smirk. To him, she was just a medic, someone whose value lay in patching up injuries after others had already faced the danger. He assigned her to rear duties without hesitation, ensuring she would remain far from the front line, far from real action, and far from the decisions that mattered most. Many others nodded in agreement, reinforcing the idea that a medic's role was limited and safe. But the young medic did not let his skepticism discourage her. Instead, she viewed it as another challenge, another obstacle to overcome. She studied the commander from a distance, learning not just his strengths but his habits, his patterns, and his reactions under pressure. She noticed the small gestures he made when stressed, the way he communicated silently with his officers, and even the moments when his attention wavered. Each observation was stored carefully in her mind, like pieces of a puzzle she would one day need to solve in the heat of battle. While the commander was critical and distant, she continued performing her duties with precision. She treated minor injuries, organized supplies efficiently, and remained calm in every situation. Her quiet competence began to attract attention, not from everyone, but from those who valued skill over rank or title. Fellow medics watched her closely, some with admiration, some with envy, but all noting her dedication. She knew that to earn the commander's respect, she would need to go beyond ordinary effort. Every small act of efficiency, every careful observation, and every demonstration of skill was a silent argument in her favor. The daily life at the base continued to test her patience and resolve. The drills were grueling, often lasting for hours under harsh sun or pouring rain. Soldiers stumbled, shouted, and pushed themselves to the limit, while she moved among them, observing and learning. She practiced carrying heavy medical packs, weaving through obstacles as quickly as possible, and anticipating emergencies before they happened. She even began timing herself, simulating scenarios where she would need to reach a wounded soldier under fire or navigate a chaotic battlefield. The physical and mental strain was enormous, but she embraced it, knowing that preparation was her only path to being taken seriously. At times, the commander would pass by, watching her silently. He never offered praise, only occasional nods of acknowledgement when he thought no one was looking. His lack of open approval could have been discouraging, but she interpreted it differently. Each quiet glance was a challenge, a test, a question she had yet to answer, and she was determined to answer it with action rather than words. Her interactions with other soldiers also shaped her preparation. Many still mocked her quietly, calling her just a medic, and joking that she would never survive outside the safe zones. Yet some of them began to notice that she moved with purpose, that she anticipated problems, and that she could act under pressure without panicking. Slowly, doubts about her ability began to surface in the minds of others, even if they didn't admit it. She realized that leadership wasn't just about rank. It was about influence, skill, and courage, and she intended to demonstrate all three when the right moment arrived. Meanwhile, the commander's presence added a new layer of intensity to her training. He was known for putting his soldiers through extreme scenarios, testing their ability to make decisions quickly and under pressure. Though he did not actively involve her in these exercises, she observed them with keen interest. She watched how he handled emergencies, how he communicated strategy under stress, and how he evaluated the soldiers' responses. These observations were more valuable than any direct training. They gave her insight into his thinking, which she could use to anticipate his actions and protect both herself and him in future dangerous situations. Despite all the challenges, she began to feel a quiet confidence growing within her. She knew that she was ready for more than the rear duties assigned to her. Her skills were sharp, her observations precise, and her courage unwavering. She understood that being underestimated was a form of protection in a way. It allowed her to prepare without interference, to learn without constant scrutiny, and to develop a plan for when she would finally be needed. And deep down, she sensed that this day would come sooner than anyone expected. The commander, for all his discipline and skepticism, was facing a situation that would test everyone at the base. And when that moment arrived, the young medic knew she would be ready, not just to survive, but to step forward, take control, and prove that being just a medic did not mean being powerless. Her preparation, her patience, and her quiet determination were building toward a pivotal moment. A moment that would redefine how everyone at the base viewed her, and how she viewed herself. By the end of this period, she had become more than a medic. She had become a student of strategy, a silent observer of leadership, and a force waiting for the right moment to act. The commander's skepticism was still present, but she had already learned that respect is earned through courage and action, not through titles or assumptions. The stage was being set, and when the test came, she would be ready to step into a role no one ever expected her to fill. Life at the base had grown more intense as the young medic settled into her role, quietly proving herself while observing everyone around her. She had learned the routines, understood the base's environment, and even started reading the patterns in the soldiers' behavior. Yet, nothing could fully prepare her for the sudden and unexpected crisis that was about to hit, a moment that would push her courage, skill, and determination to the absolute limit. It started with a distant rumble, faint at first, but growing steadily. The soldiers on patrol immediately recognized the signs. Enemy forces were advancing faster than intelligence had predicted. Alarms blared across the base, and chaos erupted as soldiers scrambled to defend key positions. This was no ordinary drill, it was real, and the danger was imminent. For the first time, the young medic felt a surge of adrenaline unlike anything she had experienced before. Her training, her observations, and her silent preparation were about to be tested in the harshest way possible. The commander quickly took charge, issuing orders with authority and precision. Soldiers were rushing to their positions, setting up defenses and coordinating with units stationed nearby. Amid the controlled chaos, the young medic noticed that the commander's squad, including him, was dangerously close to the front line. There was a clear risk of casualties, and the situation demanded someone who could act fast, think clearly, and respond under pressure. Most medics would have stayed in the rear, following orders and waiting for instructions. But she was not most medics. She had spent weeks observing, training, and preparing for exactly this kind of moment. She realized that if she wanted to make a difference, she couldn't wait for permission. Every instinct in her body screamed that she needed to act, and fast. Despite knowing the risks, she volunteered to move toward the front line, fully aware that her decision would surprise, and perhaps even anger, some of the more experienced soldiers. As she moved toward the chaos, she faced immediate resistance. Some soldiers shouted at her, insisting she should stay back. "This is no place for a medic," one yelled. Others tried to physically block her path, assuming she couldn't handle the danger. She did not argue. Instead, she moved quickly, using her agility and knowledge of the base's layout to navigate the obstacles. Every step required focus. Every moment demanded courage. She had trained herself for this, and now she was putting that training into action. The closer she got to the front line, the clearer the danger became. Bullets whizzed past. Explosions shook the ground, and smoke filled the air, making visibility nearly impossible. Soldiers were shouting, some giving orders, others calling out for help. Amid the chaos, she spotted the commander pinned down behind a barricade, injured and unable to move quickly. Her heart pounded, but she didn't hesitate. She sprinted toward him, ignoring the shouts and danger around her. Reaching the commander was only the first challenge. He had sustained injuries that made it difficult for him to stand, and the enemy was closing in. She assessed the situation instantly, combining her medical knowledge with battlefield awareness. She applied emergency first aid to stabilize him while simultaneously finding a route to move him to safety. Every second counted. Every decision had to be precise. There was no time for doubt, fear, or hesitation. Her actions began to have a ripple effect. Soldiers nearby, who had previously doubted her abilities, saw her moving with confidence and purpose. Her courage inspired them to regroup, to refocus on their mission, and to push back against the advancing enemy. What had begun as a desperate situation was slowly shifting, largely because of her initiative. She wasn't just treating wounds. She was changing the course of the battle through action, leadership, and quick thinking. Dragging the commander through the smoke and debris was exhausting and dangerous, but she refused to stop. Her muscles burned, her lungs ached, and the chaos around her seemed endless. Yet she persisted, motivated by the knowledge that if she faltered, the commander, and possibly the mission, could be lost. Every step she took was deliberate, every decision calculated. She used cover, timing, and strategy to minimize risk, moving with a combination of courage and intelligence that few could match. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, she reached a relatively safer position. The commander was stabilized, and she had successfully navigated through one of the most dangerous parts of the battlefield. Her actions not only saved him but also provided a rallying point for the soldiers around them. Her presence shifted the morale of the troops. They were no longer just defending. They were ready to fight back, inspired by the bravery of someone they had once underestimated. In that moment, the young medic realized something profound. Courage wasn't about following orders blindly, nor was it about avoiding danger. It was about using skill, intelligence, and determination to act when it mattered most. She had stepped out of the role others had assigned to her, proving that being just a medic did not define her limits. Her preparation, patience, and quiet determination had transformed her into someone capable of extraordinary action under extreme pressure. By the end of the day, the immediate danger had passed, but the impact of her actions was clear. The soldiers who had mocked her now looked at her with a mixture of surprise, respect, and admiration. Even the commander, initially skeptical of her abilities, saw firsthand the combination of courage, skill, and leadership that she possessed. She had not only saved a life, she had changed how everyone at the base perceived her. This mission would mark a turning point in her journey. She had proven that actions, not titles, define true courage. And she knew that this was just the beginning. There would be more challenges, more tests, and more opportunities to show that she was capable of far more than anyone had ever imagined. Her quiet determination had finally met the chaos of battle, and it had not only survived but had triumphed. The battle had reached a critical point, and the young medic had already proven her courage by reaching the commander under fire. But now came the moment that would truly test her skills, intelligence, and ability to act under pressure. The battlefield around her was chaos. Explosions rocked the ground, bullets tore through the air, and smoke filled every corner, making it almost impossible to see clearly. Soldiers were shouting, taking cover, and trying desperately to follow orders. It was a scene that would have frozen many in fear, but she had trained herself to stay calm, to observe, and to act decisively. As she looked around, she realized that simply stabilizing the commander would not be enough. The enemy was advancing in force, and without immediate action, not only the commander but the entire unit could be overwhelmed. Her mind raced as she quickly assessed the situation. The safest path for extraction, the locations of the enemy forces, and where she could find cover while moving. Every decision had to be fast and precise, because even a small mistake could be fatal. She could feel the weight of responsibility, but instead of fear, it sharpened her focus. The first step was to keep the commander steady. Using her medical knowledge, she applied pressure to his wounds, stabilized his limbs, and ensured he could be moved without aggravating his injuries. At the same time, she called out to nearby soldiers, giving concise directions to help cover their path. Her voice was calm, firm, and authoritative, surprising many who had doubted her abilities just moments before. The soldiers began to follow her lead, instinctively recognizing that she knew exactly what she was doing. Her role had shifted in an instant, from a medic assisting in the background to a leader orchestrating the movement of key personnel under extreme danger. With the commander stabilized, she began to drag him toward relative safety. Every step was a calculated risk. Bullets whizzed past, and debris fell from explosions nearby. She used her knowledge of cover, timing her movements between bursts of enemy fire. Her arms and legs burned from the physical exertion, but she refused to stop. Her mind remained clear, focused entirely on the task at hand. Every decision was based on observation, experience, and quick judgment, the skills she had honed through weeks of preparation and quiet training. The impact of her actions became evident almost immediately. Soldiers who had once doubted her began to rally around her, inspired by her courage. They started moving strategically, providing cover, and following her directions. It was as if her determination created a ripple effect, transforming the morale and effectiveness of the unit. What had seemed like an impossible situation began to shift in their favor, largely because one person had stepped up and acted decisively when it mattered most. Despite the chaos, she continued to think ahead. She noticed weak points in the enemy's approach and communicated them to the soldiers covering their flank. She identified obstacles that could be used for protection and guided the movement of both the commander and the troops. Her actions were not only about survival, they were tactical, practical, and precise. She had become a crucial part of the strategy on the battlefield, someone whose insight and quick thinking could determine the outcome. There were moments when fear threatened to overwhelm her. A sudden explosion sent a shockwave through the ground, throwing dirt and debris into her eyes. Smoke filled her lungs, making it hard to breathe. Yet she pushed through, relying on training, instinct, and sheer determination. Her focus never wavered. The commander's safety and the success of the mission were her top priorities. Every ounce of energy, every bit of courage, was channeled into moving forward. As they advanced toward a safer position, she continued to provide medical attention, ensuring that the commander remained stable and conscious. She encouraged him quietly, keeping his morale high, while simultaneously motivating nearby soldiers. Her calm confidence in the midst of chaos was contagious, giving others the strength to fight and follow her lead. In those moments, she was no longer just a medic. She was a force, a leader, and a hero in action. Finally, after what felt like hours compressed into minutes, she reached a location that offered cover and relative safety. The commander was out of immediate danger, stabilized, and able to reassess the situation. soldiers who had been scattered were now regrouping, inspired by her courage and leadership. What had started as a desperate, chaotic fight was now turning in favor of their side. The young medic's actions had not only saved a life but had changed the course of the engagement. In the aftermath, the significance of her courage began to settle in. Soldiers who had once mocked her were now looking at her with respect and admiration. The commander, who had doubted her abilities from the start, recognized the extraordinary combination of skill, intelligence, and bravery that she had demonstrated. She had moved beyond the limitations of her assigned role, proving that true courage and leadership were not determined by title or rank. They were defined by action, determination, and the willingness to step forward when others hesitated. Her actions on the battlefield became a turning point, not just for the immediate fight, but for how she would be seen from that moment onward. The young medic had transformed into someone capable of influencing the outcome of life and death situations. She had shown that preparation, observation, and quiet determination could turn underestimation into an advantage. By stepping forward when it mattered most, she had earned respect, admiration, and a new role in the eyes of everyone at the base. Through the struggle, the fire, and the chaos, she had demonstrated that being a medic did not mean being powerless. Courage, intelligence, and decisive action could elevate anyone from a background role to a central figure in even the most dangerous situations. That day, she proved not only to the commander and the soldiers around her, but to herself that she could lead, inspire, and survive in the face of overwhelming odds. The battle had reached a turning point, and the young medic, who had already shown incredible courage, now found herself in a position where her actions could determine the outcome for the entire unit. The commander, once skeptical of her abilities, was now relying on her more than he realized. She had stabilized him, navigated through fire, and inspired soldiers around her. But the chaos was far from over. The enemy was regrouping, and the front line needed more than just survival. It needed someone to act decisively to change the momentum of the fight. Everywhere she looked, soldiers were exhausted, scared, and struggling to maintain their positions. The air was thick with smoke, and the ground shook from the repeated explosions nearby. The young medic knew that hesitation here could cost lives, so she acted without a second thought. Using both her medical expertise and battlefield intuition, she began coordinating movements, directing troops toward cover, and giving clear, concise instructions. For the first time, the soldiers began to see her not just as a medic, but as a leader capable of making split-second decisions under extreme pressure. She noticed small openings in the enemy's formation, moments when a few coordinated actions could push back the attackers. Without waiting for orders, she signaled the nearby soldiers, guiding them to use these weak points effectively. Her ability to think quickly, observe enemy behavior, and anticipate their moves began to shift the battle in their favor. Soldiers who had once doubted her followed her lead, realizing that she had a strategic mind that complemented her medical skills. She was no longer just helping. She was actively influencing the fight. At one point, an enemy squad attempted to flank them, threatening to cut off the commander and his team from safety. The young medic reacted instantly. She directed a small group of soldiers to intercept the flank while keeping the commander protected. Simultaneously, she applied emergency care to a wounded soldier, ensuring he could continue to contribute rather than becoming a liability. Every action she took balanced risk with opportunity, showing a remarkable understanding of both human and tactical elements of combat. Her leadership was practical, fearless, and effective. Her courage had a contagious effect. Soldiers who had been hesitant or fearful began to move with renewed confidence. They saw that she could maintain composure in life-threatening situations, make sound decisions, and protect those around her. Morale, which had been slipping under the intense pressure, began to recover. This newfound energy allowed the unit to coordinate counterattacks, cover vulnerable positions, and press the enemy back in a way that would have been impossible without her influence. The young medic had shifted from a background role to the center of strategy simply by taking initiative and leading by example. The commander, who had watched her with quiet disbelief, now understood her true capability. Her combination of bravery, intelligence, and calmness under fire had saved not only his life, but also the lives of countless soldiers around them. He recognized that her actions were more than heroic, they were strategic. In that moment, he began to see her as someone who could operate under pressure as effectively as any trained combat officer. Respect replaced skepticism, and his trust in her abilities became implicit. Amid the chaos, she never lost focus on her primary goal, the safety and stability of those she was responsible for. She continued treating the injured, managing supplies, and guiding the soldiers, all while maintaining her own safety. Her actions demonstrated an extraordinary combination of multitasking, prioritization, and courage. Even when surrounded by danger, she remained calm and composed, thinking several steps ahead. Her presence was a beacon of stability and competence in a situation that could have easily descended into panic and confusion. As the battle wore on, it became clear that her intervention was the turning point. The enemy, facing coordinated resistance and unexpected leadership from someone they had underestimated, began to retreat. Soldiers who had doubted her cheered as their lines held firm and counterattacks succeeded. The young medic had not only saved lives but had also ensured the success of the mission. Her actions had changed the tide of battle, proving that courage and initiative could have a profound impact, regardless of assigned role. By the end of the fight, she stood among the soldiers, exhausted but composed. The soldiers around her were no longer mocking or doubting her. They were celebrating her bravery and competence. The commander personally acknowledged her, praising her ability to act decisively, think strategically, and inspire those around her. She had earned respect, trust, and recognition in a way that words alone could never achieve. Her role had evolved from just a medic to an essential leader on the battlefield, someone whose actions had tangible consequences on the survival and success of her unit. This moment was transformative, not just for the soldiers around her, but for herself as well. She had proven, in the most intense circumstances, that preparation, courage, and intelligence could overcome prejudice and underestimation. Every hour of training, every observation she had made, and every challenge she had endured at the base had culminated in this victory. She realized that being underestimated had actually given her an advantage. No one expected her to lead, to strategize, or to act with such effectiveness. This allowed her to operate freely without interference, and make a difference in a way few could have predicted. By the conclusion of the battle, her reputation had shifted completely. The soldiers who once laughed at her now looked at her with admiration. The commander, once skeptical, now saw her as indispensable. She had not only proven her worth but had also changed the way everyone at the base understood courage, skill, and leadership. Her actions demonstrated that being just a medic was never a limitation. Courage, intelligence, and decisive action could elevate anyone to heroism in the most unexpected ways. After the battle had ended, a calm began to settle over the base, but the aftermath of the fight was far from quiet. Soldiers moved carefully among debris and damaged equipment, checking supplies, tending to the wounded, and assessing the overall situation. Amid this chaos, the young medic stood quietly, exhausted but composed, her mind already reviewing every moment of the battle. She had done what few had thought possible. She had saved the commander, guided soldiers through danger, and helped turn the tide of the fight. Yet, despite her achievements, there was still a lingering sense of disbelief among those who had once underestimated her. It began subtly. Soldiers who had laughed at her, whispered jokes about her abilities, or openly doubted her now began to look at her differently. There was a mix of awe and respect in their eyes, a quiet acknowledgement that she had exceeded every expectation. Her actions had been fearless, precise, and intelligent, qualities that could not be ignored or dismissed. One by one, they approached her, not with teasing or condescension, but with sincere words of gratitude. "I didn't think you could do it," one soldier admitted, shaking his head. "But you were incredible out there." Another simply nodded, a silent but clear sign of newfound respect. The commander, who had been skeptical of her abilities from the start, finally approached her directly. His expression, which had often been stern and analytical, now carried a mix of admiration and recognition. He praised her not just for her bravery, but for her leadership, quick thinking, and ability to stay calm under pressure. "You didn't just save me," he said. "You changed the outcome of the entire engagement. Your actions today proved that courage and skill have nothing to do with rank or title." Those words, spoken by a man whose respect she had long sought to earn, carried weight far beyond what she could have imagined. Even as she received praise, the young medic remained humble. She knew that the battle had been a team effort. Without the soldiers' support and the coordinated actions of others, her efforts alone would not have been enough. Yet, she could not ignore the transformation in how she was perceived. The laughter, doubt, and ridicule that had greeted her arrival were gone, replaced by recognition and admiration. She had gone from being just a medic to someone whose presence and decisions were critical to the success of the unit. Her story began to spread across the base quickly. Other medics, soldiers, and officers recounted the events, emphasizing how she had acted decisively, guided the commander to safety, and inspired those around her. Younger soldiers, in particular, were captivated by her example. They began to see that courage was not defined by physical strength alone, nor by rank, but by the willingness to step forward when it mattered most. She became an inspiration, a symbol of determination and capability in the face of skepticism. The change in atmosphere was palpable. Soldiers who had doubted her now sought her advice, asking for guidance on medical techniques, strategies for staying calm under pressure, and even tips for observing and anticipating danger in combat situations. Her quiet confidence, once overlooked, was now recognized as a valuable asset. She was no longer just a participant in the base's daily life. She had become a mentor, a role model, and a respected figure whose experience and judgment were valued. The commander, in particular, began to rely on her insights more frequently. He involved her in planning exercises, consulting her on potential risks, and even seeking her perspective on strategic decisions. This level of trust was remarkable, especially considering how skeptical he had been when she first arrived. It was a testament to her intelligence, preparation, and courage that she had earned this position, not through words, but through decisive action and consistent demonstration of skill under pressure. Even beyond the base, her story began to inspire others. Soldiers who had been stationed elsewhere or who had heard about the events through communication channels admired her courage. Her actions challenged assumptions about what a medic could do, proving that anyone, regardless of role, could make a critical difference if they were prepared, focused, and fearless. The young medic had become more than a hero in one battle. She had become a living example of how determination and skill could break barriers and redefine expectations. Despite the accolades and recognition, she remained grounded. She continued performing her duties with diligence, tending to the wounded, training alongside other medics, and quietly observing the base's routines. She understood that heroism was not just a single act. It was the consistent application of courage, skill, and intelligence over time. Her actions during the battle had earned respect, but it was her ongoing dedication that solidified her reputation as someone indispensable to the unit. By the end of this period, the young medic had completed a profound transformation. From a newcomer dismissed as just a medic, she had become a respected, trusted, and admired member of the base. Her courage had saved lives, her intelligence had influenced outcomes, and her determination had inspired an entire unit. She had proven that true capability was measured not by labels or assumptions, but by action, preparation, and the willingness to step forward in the face of danger. In quiet moments, she reflected on how far she had come. The ridicule and doubt she had faced had not deterred her. Instead, they had motivated her to push harder, observe more carefully, and act more decisively. She had turned skepticism into an opportunity for growth, and in doing so had redefined what it meant to be a medic, a soldier, and a hero. Her story was no longer just her own. It belonged to everyone who had witnessed her courage, learned from her example, and been inspired to rise above doubt and expectation. After the dust of battle had settled and the wounded had been treated, the young medic finally had a moment to reflect on everything that had happened. The base was still busy with cleanup and recovery, But there was a new energy in the air, a sense of respect, admiration, and hope that had not existed before. She had endured ridicule, doubt, and skepticism since her arrival. But now, after weeks of preparation and a single, decisive battle, she had proven herself beyond question. The transformation in how others saw her was dramatic, and it was not just about admiration. It was about trust, respect, and inspiration. Her actions during the battle had left a lasting impression on everyone at the base. Soldiers who had once whispered and laughed now approached her with gratitude and curiosity, eager to learn from her experience. They wanted to understand how she had stayed calm under fire, how she had made decisions so quickly, and how she had led them effectively through chaos. Her example became a teaching moment for the entire unit, showing that courage was not reserved for those in combat roles alone. Anyone, regardless of their position, could make a difference if they were prepared, observant, and willing to act. The commander, whose respect she had earned during the battle, took special care to acknowledge her contributions publicly. He spoke to the soldiers about her bravery, describing in detail how she had saved his life and influenced the outcome of the fight. His words carried weight, as he was someone whose praise was rarely given lightly. For the first time, many soldiers realized that their assumptions about roles and titles had been misguided. Leadership, courage, and intelligence were not limited to officers or combat specialists. They could be found in anyone willing to step forward when it mattered most. Her story began to ripple through the base. Medics, soldiers, and officers alike started to adopt her example, noticing the power of preparation, observation, and quiet determination. Training routines changed slightly, as instructors emphasized not just physical strength or combat skill, but also the importance of intelligence, awareness, and decision-making in high-pressure situations. Young soldiers were particularly inspired. They saw that heroism could come from unexpected places, and they began to challenge their own assumptions about who could make a difference. The young medic, however, remained humble. She continued her duties as if nothing had changed, tending to the wounded, helping train others, and quietly observing the base's operations. She understood that heroism was not a single act but a continuous effort. Every day offered opportunities to act with courage, intelligence, and integrity. By maintaining her dedication, she reinforced the lessons learned from her actions on the battlefield. That preparation and skill could turn skepticism into respect, and that quiet determination could redefine expectations. Her influence extended beyond immediate recognition. Soldiers began approaching her for advice, guidance, and mentorship. They sought her opinion on medical procedures, battlefield awareness, and even strategies for maintaining composure under extreme stress. In this way, her impact grew, not just in terms of admiration but in practical, ongoing contributions to the base's effectiveness. She had become a leader in a way that transcended rank or role, someone whose judgment and experience were valued in situations far beyond her original responsibilities. Even the commander relied on her insights more than ever. He consulted her about training exercises, observed how she approached challenges, and incorporated her feedback into strategic decisions. Their relationship had shifted from one of skepticism and doubt to mutual respect and trust. He recognized that she had not only saved his life but had also saved lives by inspiring and guiding others. She had become indispensable, and the lessons she imparted would influence the base long after the battle was over. In quiet moments, she reflected on her journey. She remembered her first days at the base, the ridicule, the whispered doubts, and the constant underestimation she faced. Every challenge, every small act of preparation, had led to this moment of recognition. She realized that those who doubted her had inadvertently strengthened her resolve. The skepticism had pushed her to train harder, observe more carefully, and act with greater precision. In a sense, their doubt had become her advantage, forging her into someone capable of extraordinary action. Her story also inspired others to reconsider their own limitations. Soldiers who had previously assumed that courage and leadership were qualities reserved for certain roles began to see themselves differently. They realized that anyone, if prepared and willing to act, could influence outcomes, save lives, and earn respect. Her example became a living lesson in determination, skill, and bravery, demonstrating that true heroes are defined not by titles but by actions. By the end of this period, the young medic had completed a remarkable transformation. She had evolved from a newcomer dismissed as just a medic to a respected, trusted, and admired leader on the base. She had proven that courage, intelligence, and decisive action could overcome prejudice and underestimation. Her influence extended far beyond her individual achievements. She had changed the culture of the base, inspiring others to rise above doubt and embrace their own potential. In the quiet aftermath, she knew that her journey was far from over. There would be new challenges, new battles, and new opportunities to demonstrate courage and skill. But she also understood that she had already left a lasting legacy. She had shown that being underestimated could become a source of strength, that preparation and determination were powerful tools, and that anyone, regardless of their role, could become a hero. The base, once skeptical of her abilities, now recognized her as a symbol of courage, skill, and inspiration. A reminder that true heroism often comes from the most unexpected places. Her story, once filled with doubt and ridicule, had become one of triumph and respect. She had transformed not only how others saw her but also how they viewed the very idea of courage, skill, and leadership. And as she continued her duties, quietly observing, learning, and helping others, she knew that her actions would resonate long into the future, inspiring a new generation of soldiers to act bravely, think intelligently, and challenge every expectation placed upon them.